most of the people involved at Mendable, myself included, are not mental health professionals. But we come to the Mendable world because we care about other people, we care about mental wellness and well-being. And one of the things that we are qualified to do, even if we're not professionally qualified to diagnose anybody with any mental health disease, is to tell our stories and encourage other people to tell theirs. And the more stories that we tell, the more people that are very open and honest about their background and what they've been through, we just get that little bit further every time to breaking down that stigma associated with mental illness. So everybody's got their own story. Everybody is unique. One size doesn't fit all. And today's guest is a very loyal member of the Mendable family. So great pleasure to sit down here and chat today to Mark Smith. So Mark, thanks for taking the time and chatting with me today about Mendable.
No problem, David. Been glad to do this for quite some time.
So anyway, Mark, I'd love to ask you a little bit. I know you've got a lot of stories you could tell, but I know you were born in Northampton, but you grew up and spent most of your adult life, I know, in the Bristol area. Would you tell us a little bit about your childhood? I know that you had a few rough things happen in your early life and you ended up in foster care. So how did that all come about and how was your childhood?
So yeah, as quite rightly pointed out, I was born in Northampton. My dad, who I don't contact or speak to or anything anymore, I don't know where he's at. He could be alive, could be dead, I don't know. He's actually from the Liverpool area originally. Moved from Northampton to the Bristol, Bath area in 2003. And then I would say my mum's partner, who was at the time living in Northampton, he was an ex-army sergeant. He came to live with us down in this part of the area. I think I must have been roughly 2 weeks before I turned the age of 14 years old. I got put into foster care. And obviously, you know, I guess when you think about it, I have moved around a lot, you know. I haven't really had much of a stable location. And so obviously my first foster care was in the town of Trowbridge in Wiltshire. And then I had a brief spell in Westbury. Then I moved to Melksham, moved back to Trowbridge, then back to Melksham again. Yeah, it's kind of crazy because, you know, I was in foster care from the age of 14 to 18. I went through like 6 different foster families. I weren't ever in a care home like children's home. I was just like with a family. Except the difference being is when I was living in Trowbridge for the first time, I had a respite carer who was the carer that I had in Westbury. And so every couple of weeks or like once a month, whatever, I would go to Westbury just to give my main carer some respite. I think my last foster carer was in Melksham. The joy with living in Melksham, though, was that the first time round, so one of the main carers I had in Melksham was I lived in between 2 farms. I lived in a really nice cottage. It was really nice. I'd never lived in a cottage before, and things like that. It was just nice, peaceful, and quiet. You know, I'd had a farm on one side and then a farm on the other. So I was kind of like used to all the farm smells and the sounds of farm machinery and stuff like that.
So you became a farm boy for a while?
Yeah, although technically we didn't associate ourselves with the farmers. You know, my carers at that location weren't farmers themselves. We just lived a quiet, sort of like tranquil sort of life with me, their Springer Spaniel, and their son at university who would come back home for like every couple of weeks or so.
Yeah. And so, Mark, when you were living between all these different foster families, did you get attached to them? You know, did you feel a part of their family, or did you always kind of feel a bit of an outsider? How did that work for you?
That's quite interesting because, you know, my first foster carer in Trowbridge, they didn't have no children themselves. They only had a dog. So I was technically the only teenager / child in the house. So they got on well with me, you know, I got on well with them. And I just want to go on record. I never had a problem with any of the foster families that I spent time with and lived with and stuff. And they're all great to me in their own ways. But yeah, my life hasn't been easy growing up, you know.
Yeah.
Growing up in the foster care system, growing up in a troubled, turbulent home before I went into foster care, because I'm not going to lie, my mum's ex-army sergeant boyfriend was not a nice man entirely. He was quite scary. He, as far as I'm aware, he wasn't abusive, but the fact that the things he's done, the things that you've seen, the way he'd speak to you, it would kind of put fear into you, especially as a child at a young age. And plus the fact that he always, in the whole time that I've known him and the whole time that he was involved in our little close family, he actually still was allowed to keep his service revolver. So he had a gun locked up in a drawer, a pistol. And obviously, I'd seen it a couple of times, you know, and obviously, yeah, that was kind of scary, living with a man who had a gun in the house. And then he's telling us all these crazy, scary army stories about how he's seen his friends' legs blown off and stuff like that. And it was...
So that's really interesting, because I can see how being associated with somebody who was not a good person to you, had this former military background, had a gun and everything. And yet I know that you spent some time in the Air Cadets. So you had like your own time with a bit of a military existence yourself. How did that come about for you, and how did that work?
So obviously that came about years after my mum had broken up with him. And it came about, I'd say, 3 years into being in foster care. I think it was around 2006 that I entered the Royal Air Force Air Cadets, and I left, I think, in about 2008. So I think I did about 2.5, maybe 3 years service in it. I loved it. You know, I loved the Air Cadets. It took me a while to get promoted through the hierarchy and stuff. And then, you know, you're only allowed to be in there to a certain age, and that kind of disappointed me a bit, because I wanted to at least try and get more promotions. I got promoted to leading cadet, I think it's called, which basically means sort of like you show newer cadets the ropes and stuff and things like that. It's kind of like the step below like corporal and stuff. I learned a lot of skills. I learned discipline, and you know, I helped the cadets out at events, you know, such as race days at Castle Coombe. That I remember that very well. But yeah, I did enjoy my time there, you know, and
good.
I would do something like that, because it will teach you a lot of skills that you can use later on in life.
Yeah. Did you ever consider a career in the military?
Yeah, I did. I did at the time, but obviously finishing school with no GCSEs, I was kind of like,
And just for the benefit of anybody outside the UK, GCSE is General Certificate of Secondary Education, which is like the typical high school qualification that teenagers take in the school system here in the UK. So Mark, you reunited with your family. You went back there, and then I know that in your teenage years you did have some brushes with law enforcement. I know you never really got into serious trouble, but would you tell us a little bit about that time and some of the things that you did during that period?
But yeah, I left the foster care system at 18. I was then designated as a care leaver, so they helped put me into like a hostel and stuff. You know, there were druggies around, and other bad influences, and I just didn't want to get caught up in that. But however, during my time at the hostel, I was actually kind of surrounding myself with bad influences, because that's all that there was, you know. There was just, so I was kind of around that, and you know, I started getting arrested, and it wasn't easy at all. Most of the stuff, thankfully, touch wood, never involved a custodial sentence. So I was never in youth offenders. I was never in a prison. I would just get slaps on the wrist of cautions, you know, and it was for stupid stuff, you know, smashing windows and things like that, criminal damage. Although there were 2 actual serious crimes, which thankfully didn't result in a prison sentence or anything like that. The first one being, I don't know if it's GBH or ABH or something. It basically involved me having a scuffle with a security guard who was the security guard of that hostel. And I just want it to be known now, like, I'm not a violent guy. Never have been, never be. I mean, I know it's, you know, you play squabble with your siblings and stuff, but I've never actually been violent.
Well, I think anybody that knows you, and even people that don't know you that well, I mean, that definitely comes across that you are not an aggressive person. I think we all know that. So, Mark, I'd like to turn to a very positive thing in your life, and that is football. I know that you are a very devoted fan, supporter. You help out a lot with youth football. You love to play, although I think you haven't really played for a long time. Would you tell us what influence football has had on your life? I know it's taken a few different turns, but what does it represent for you?
Football has definitely been something that's been kind of like in and out of my life, I would say, from an early age. I was living in a small village just outside Bristol and Bath, and there would be like people always at the park having a kick about, people down the village hall fields having a kick about and stuff. And so yeah, then one day suddenly out of the blue, posters went up, big huge posters went up around the village saying there's going to be like this sports event, there's going to be like open football trials where scouts were going to be coming. And so yeah, I thought, yeah, why not go along and see what's like, you know. And it made sense for me to go as well because all my mates at that time were going. Pretty much, I'd say 80% of the village kids were going. So yeah, like it just made sense. Everyone would just go down there, and so I went down there. Didn't know what to expect. Didn't think I'd get a serious look at from anyone. But you know, I just went down there, had a kick about with the football coaches that were putting on the event, and obviously there were scouts on the sidelines just watching everyone. And turns out two of those scouts, one was from Everton, one was from Tottenham Hotspur, and they took a close look at me and like three other lads, and they were really interested in me. But obviously, being under the age of like 15, 16, under 14, whatever, they had to get my parents' consent to like for them to have a proper further look at me, and they both wanted me to come to their academies up in Liverpool and London. And yeah, my mum didn't want me to go because A, she didn't drive, and B, she didn't want to be driving me all over. She didn't want to be traveling all over the country and me taking me to games and training and whatnot. And she didn't want to move the family at that time. So I kind of had to give it up, which affected me for like 19 odd years or so. In 2016, however, that's when I started to get more back interested into football. I became a security steward at Bristol City Football Club at Ashton Gate. And then, you know, was in that job for about a year. And then I just did other things in between, kind of took my mind off football a little bit, tried to concentrate on myself and my other interests. And then I'd say probably 2 years ago, so like probably just before COVID, I was like, you know what, let's see if there's any football teams locally or anyone interested in, you know, let me get some experience in football. And that's when I contacted, you know, Keynsham Town Football Club, which I live in Keynsham now, near Bristol. And so I contacted that club, and yeah, came down, spoke to them. They were really happy to meet me, and they said, yeah, come down and volunteer for us. So I've been there about a year and a half now, I think. And yeah, I've literally been helping them since pretty much early of last season, with all kinds of things, you know, making sure the equipment's in order, I guess, helping out in the clubhouse, helping out catch missing balls and things like that. So I've kind of been like ball boy / clubhouse sort of like grounds staff, so helping get the pitch ready, get the flagpoles up ready. And I have had moments where, you know, I'd be in the dressing room getting the kits players ready before the match, hanging them all up on the pegs and stuff, so it looks like you're walking into a Premiership club sort of dressing room. And then, even though I've not officially been given the title, I've de facto given myself the title of club support liaison officer, because I just don't see anyone else doing it. I don't see anyone else connecting with the fans like I do and speaking to the fans like I do. So I've kind of just been doing that and walking around and making sure all the fans there are smiling and are happy and cheering, and whether for their team, their players. And this goes for the opponents, you know. I make sure that they're feeling comfortable as well, you know, making sure that they know where the facilities are, you know, like where the toilets are, where they can get a drink, where they can get food, things like that. And then in the past year, I've been greenlit, is what I call it, by the FA. I contacted the FA to see if there was any chance I could still play. And so obviously I've got my player ID number, which is something you actually have to have as a football player, regardless, any level, Premier League, non-league, grassroots, you have to have what's called a FAN, which is a FA number. I bought myself some shin pads and some football boots just in case I needed to go on the pitch and do stuff. So I had trials with some teams. They said no, unfortunately. But I have been invited to come again with some of those teams next season. So at the moment, I'm still one attached. I'm still classed as a free transfer. But in the meantime, I've been fulfilling my love of football in other ways. You know, I did a FA recognised sort of like national accredited course called the Playmaker course, which I passed just a couple of weeks ago, actually. So that now means basically I can help out other football team managers and coaches with training sessions and things like that.
So really, I think there's a great lesson to be learnt from all of that, Mark, because, you know, despite the turmoil that you've had in your life, when you put yourself in a very positive environment in a sport that you love, surrounding yourself with people that are like-minded and also love the sport, it's a great positive influence on your life. I know you've had a lot of negativity in your past, but, you know, great kudos to you for finding something that you really enjoy. And I know that you'd love to be playing, and I know that you've had a few bumps in the road there. So just wish you every success and hope that it eventually comes together for you.
Yeah, I was just thinking, actually, you know, one of the main great advantages and one of the main perks of helping out on my local football team is not only do I get out to meet people, but it also gives me something else to do besides being stuck in my house all day, you know. And I can form new connections, new friendships. One of actually, last season, so last year when I first got involved, you know, I formed this friendship with this like American girl, you know, and she was helping out. She's currently back out there in the States right now. The great thing about Mia is that she's actually a professional herself. She's actually a professional footballer. You know, she does a lot of stuff, more than I do, and, you know, my hat is off to her. I love everyone, really. I'm a real people person.
That's great, Mark. So I'm just going to ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up here. So looking back on your life, if you could go back and change anything, what would you do differently?
Ooh, where do I begin? Well, I would tell my younger self to knuckle down and not be as rebellious as I did when I was younger. To learn to do things that will inspire generations. To pursue my dream job. Ever since the age of 4 years old, I wanted to become a police officer. And obviously I had a second backup job in case the police didn't work out, you know, which was to work on the airlines, you know. with planes and be able to travel the world and stuff. Neither of those happened because obviously, one, I got into trouble with law enforcement, and two, I developed a fear of planes and heights and things like that. Fortunately, I got over that because I took my first trip abroad in 2008. But yeah, that was quite nerve-wracking. Going down the wrong way at God knows how fast. I had to suck on some gummy sweets and things like that and hold my teacher's hand. It was a school leavers trip. And it took us skiing into a beautiful snowy town called Morzine in 2008. And that was quite an adventure and quite a new lesson, as you were.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gave me enough insight into things. And you know what? From that trip, I would say I developed a taste of exploring different cultures and exploring different foods. That's something that I'll carry to my day now, because I love exploring different cultures. I love trying foods I've never tried before. I love hearing languages and voices and accents and things I've never heard before.
Well, it's amazing how people can be very welcoming. And I know that just a few weeks ago, I interviewed Nicole, who we know as the anxiety coach, and she was talking a lot about people's perception of themselves and their own self-esteem and self-worth, and saying how, it's very easy to beat yourself up and put yourself down and say, people are not going to like me, I'm going to be rejected. But, for the most part, many people can be very good. So the more we put ourselves out there, the better. So, Mark, I really want to talk about Mendable. I want to finish up talking about Mendable.
There's actually a very good thing from Nicole there. As you know, I know Nicole. I love Nicole. Nicole loves me, doesn't she? And yeah, I've learned a lot from the Mendable crew. I've learned a lot as well, long before I even met, even when I first met Soph, and yeah, I love that Mendable are here supporting me, because I don't hide the fact. Yeah, I've had a turbulent life. I've had a life of getting into trouble with crime. I've had foster care things to deal with. And on top of all that, I'm 29 times currently at time of making this video with you, 29 times suicide survivor. So I'm not had it easy. Long before Mendable came along, I didn't know who to speak to about my mental health. I've spoken to shrinks in the past, but the shrinks and that I spoke to, they just wanted to dread up the past. They just wanted to talk about bad things, and they didn't want to talk about anything positive that would make me feel better. So I kind of stopped going to shrinks, and then I was like, what am I going to do now? Who am I going to speak to about my mental health, And then that's when in 2013 I met Soph. And then a couple of years later, just before the pandemic, she introduced me to Mendable.
Yeah. It means a lot to a lot of people. So, along with everybody else, I'm glad that you find it a safe space where you can come and be supportive to others and get support from others. And talking of Sophia, we're right at the end of August of 2024. I always like to drop the date in case somebody's watching this a couple of years in the future. But you saw Sophia last weekend.
Yeah, so I saw Sophia on the 25th of August 2024, which was our first face-to-face meeting since 2015, actually, because obviously we've had a lot of things go on in the world lately with the COVID pandemic. Soph's a busy woman herself, a mum of two children, and obviously professional singer, CEO, and founder of Mendable. She's got her own projects going on. The list I could write of what Soph's doing is endless. I don't fully know everything that she's doing. She only tells me a tidbit, which is crazy because I've known Sophia since July 2013. So we're talking about 11 years now. So yeah, when she mentioned this Battle of the Bulls thing to me, which happened on the 25th of August last weekend, I was like, yeah, totally, I'm coming down. Took me 2 buses to get there. But it was great because, when she explained it to me and what it's about and stuff, I was like, this is totally my street. Like, this is totally my vibe, you know, because I love football, as you know. And it was a celebrity event. So there were loads of celebrities there who I had the pleasure to meet. I met like famous people like footballers and TV presenters, Love Island stars and things like that, influencers, property tycoons, you know, you name it, they were there. And obviously Sofa's there, and there was no way that I'm not gonna go to an event local to me and not help out Soph in any way that I can and be there for her. And I was fortunate, as soon as I turned up through that gate, who was the first person I saw? Wasn't Soph, surprisingly. It was Papa Amos, Soph's dad. I recognized him straight away. I think it took him a while to recognize me. I was like, Papa Amos. And he was like, Mark. Yeah, finally happened. And, you know, Papa Amos, like, he is incredible. And I thanked him for bringing Soph into the world because, yeah, she's done so much, not only for herself, but for others too. She's been the one person in my life who has made a profound impact. I remember one time I was feeling suicidal. What did she go and do? Something that no one probably wouldn't even consider. She sent me a unreleased copy of one of her newest songs that were coming out at the time. I was one of the first persons to hear an unreleased song from her, and then obviously a couple of weeks later, released. So yeah, she made me feel better and she cheered me up.
Well, there's two things I'll say about. Well, one thing I'll say about Amos and one thing I'll say about Sophia. We could say a lot. So Amos is everybody's idea of the dad or the grandfather that they never had themselves. And we always have to remind everybody that he's Sophia's dad. He's not anybody else's. They may want him to be, but he's nobody else's, just Sophia's. And the other thing is, you know, Sophia's just a very modest person that, you know, she doesn't do it for the praise. She doesn't do it for the recognition. She does it because she cares. And I think that we could go on for a long time, but I think that truly does describe who she is. So anyway, Mark, one thing I'd like to just ask you, not to put you on the spot, and if you don't want to do it, that's fine. But as I kind of bring this to a close, I always like to tell people about the Mendable Room when it is available. Would you like to do that?
Yeah, I might not know the time, but I definitely know the dates. So Mendable meets on Monday and Thursday evening on the Clubhouse app. Hopefully soon there will be a Mendable app that Sophia is launching. So it's UK time of 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then they do it in America. I'm not quite sure. I think I have to fill that out. I'm not quite sure.
Okay, well, I'll tell you, East Coast time is 3 p.m. Mondays and Thursdays. West Coast time is noon, same days, Mondays and Thursdays. And I won't put a time on it around the world, but we do have listeners from the Middle East, from the Far East, even Australia and New Zealand. People pop in from time to time. So everybody is welcome. Please come and join us. And Mark, I'd just like to say thanks for sharing your story with us. And thanks for being here today.
That's one thing I love about Mendable as well. You know, we're worldwide, we're global, we come from all different time zones, you know. And the thing about the people in Mendable is we all come from walks of life. You know, some of us are authors, some of us are musicians, some of us are key speakers, mental health professionals, I guess, and politicians and other sort of like medical sector fields, financial people, it's varied, isn't it, in Mendable? There's loads of people from different professions and industries, and it's kind of inspiring to see where they come to then think, oh, maybe we could be like them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mark, I'd just like to say thanks for taking the time to chat with me today. I'm hoping this is going to help a lot of people that may be looking back on their lives and wondering what they could do differently. And remember, there's always a path forward. And if you haven't fulfilled your dreams yet, it's not too late to do it. It's never too late.
Totally. And I'll leave you all this leaving message, you know. There is a guy in Mendable, a very much loved guy in Mendable called Jahan Spivey, and he is just full of wisdom. He always tells people, don't give up, keep going, stay positive vibes, positive mind, and that is so true. If there's one thing I've learned from my story, is that I've got good perseverance, because I've never given up, despite being this 29-time suicide survivor. I keep pushing every day. I keep trying to remain strong. I keep thinking of the people around me, and trying to surround myself positively. So my story is really a tale of perseverance and not ever giving up. And I just want to say thank you to you, David, and to everyone in Mendable for remaining staying strong and keeping me in mind to keep going and never giving up.